Good morning. It's Thursday. Here's another debriefing of a Wednesday trip to Roaring Spring and Morrison Cove, I should say in this case. A different kind of a trip. I had that extra hour, uh, uh, which came because my Deutsch teacher was not there again. So, I did the regular. I got my raw milk, chocolate milk. I'm experimenting with chocolate raw milk as long as I water it down. It's pretty sweet, but I'm experimenting with that as a drink. Uh, well, anyway, I got that, and then I went on and I drove up, and I've begun to worry about Mervyn Martin, my teacher, because I haven't been able to reach him on the phone. And I got there, and uh, so I went unannounced, and I went up. I went to the door, and he usually comes to the door to meet me, and I even opened the door and looked in because it's like a sort of a porch kind of thing, to see if he was there. But no one was in sight, so I closed the door and I left, and I went on. And I said, "Well, I've got an hour here. What shall I do with it?" Well, I drove up the Dick Schoolhouse Road for a second time because I'm always trying to study the landscape around there, and that was uneventful. But then, as I approached Roaring Spring, I thought, I'll go into the Giant Eagle, which is this huge grocery store, and see if I can get rennet. I was on a search to get rennet. Rennet is a tablet that if you put in milk, it'll curdle it, almost like that. And I had some, but I haven't found that I've needed it. I've just let the raw milk clabber long enough that it'll then curdle it quickly by itself. But it's a little sour that way. Not sour, but tangy, really. And I thought, well, I'll experiment with rennet, go back to see what rennet does. Couldn't find it. Um, but there was a woman came by in a dress, obviously a Mennonite woman. She didn't have I don't know if she had a bonnet on or not. She was looking too, and I said to her, "Do you know what rennet is?" And she said, "Yes." She knew what rennet was, or I might have said, "Did you ever make cheese?" I don't know. But I said, I can't seem to find it here. I was looking in the right place because it's also used to thicken jelly, I think. And she looked too and couldn't find it. And we had a kind of a nice little conversation because she's actually made cheese. She even has made, I asked her, well, she's made cottage cheese, but she always uses rennet. And I said, after a while, I said, "Do you ever make hard cheese?" And she said, "Yes, farmer's cheese. I just put the curds in a colander and put I think she said like a clean kind of a pan or a bucket on top of it and filled with water to weight it down to squeeze it and make it hard." And I said, "With cheesecloth?" And she said, "No, I didn't have any cheesecloth, but I would have used it, I think, if I had it." Well, I asked her, "Do you know where you can get rennet?" And she said, named, I think, 3 stores that were possibilities that I could try. All 3 further deeper into the cove. Uh, and, going out, I decided, well, I've got the time. I like to drive up that way anyway, so I'll go. And I, I got to one, and the first one I went to, which was beyond the airport a little bit, and Peach Orchard store or something like that, more serving the Mennonite community there. And I asked, and sure enough, they had rennet, a little package of it. I got 2 of them, cheap, it cost almost nothing, and some lemon bologna. And going out, they were a little bit busy, and there was a little girl standing at the cash register. Her head didn't quite come up to the counter, and she was just pretending to be a cashier, I think. And I had tried to have a little conversation with her, and she said no, or she wasn't a cashier. I said, "Well, when you get bigger one day, you will be." No. But anyway, a woman came along, and but I completed the purchase. But I asked the girl that found it for me if she knew where a guy named Irvin Zimmerman lived. I wasn't positive I had his name, but I described him, and I said he's a bishop in the Mennonite Church around here somewhere, and a friend of the man who's teaching me Dutch, Pennsylvania Dutch. And she thought, oh yes, I said he's a tinsmith. I've heard he's a tinsmith, a sheet metal worker. And she said, yes, she knew where he was, and she told me I'd just go back the road. This is right by Curryville, beyond Curryville. Just go back the road, and it's the third place up, she thought. And the barn's red, and the house is gray, and the driveway's between the two. So I started up. In the process, forgetting my package of rennet and lemon and bologna. I think I'm going to call him today. But I got home and I still didn't have rennet. Well, anyway, I went back in there and looked around, glanced. I could see he had a shop in there, but I didn't want to be too nosy. But I just didn't see anybody around there. I parked my car and I was walking around. But then I saw some guys walking toward me, and it was Irvin and two of his grandsons probably, and talked to me a little bit. I said about my interest in his sheet metal working, and he said he'd been working in the field. He was tired anyway. He took me in to making a long story kind of a little shorter, into his shop, and I looked around. And wow, this has all the equipment that is needed in a complete traditional sheet metal worker shop. And he explained that he mostly works in stainless steel, and he had his tools and he uses spot welders. I don't know if you know what those are, but he was interested in what I was interested in. So I explained about those buckets I'm making out of aluminum, and told him that I'd shown them to Mervyn, my teacher. And that's how I'd gotten to find out that Irvin was a sheet metal worker, his bishop in his church. Well, he was very interested. We sat down and we talked for a long time. And I was so sorry I hadn't brought the buckets along, or at least one of them, to show him what I was doing. But he understood and he listened. I said, boy, the next time I come by here, I'll bring you one of my buckets to show you what I'm talking about. So, he said he's 78, and he has you want to know how old I was, and has a twin brother named Ivan and Irvin, and Ivan lives right up the road, and Ivan has I think I've got this right, Ivan has a little factory there that makes pallets, a pallet factory. I knew where that was. I'd seen that before. And he said, he's getting pretty old. He's 78 like me. And he says, well, he's probably got a big family, I said. He said, lots of sons that can take over. He said, no, he never did have a son, says Irvin. Irvin, yeah. But he had a daughter who had 13 children. Okay, he's all right. And went on more about his family and stuff. It was just, that was the highlight of the trip. So anyway, I got back on my way, not realizing I'd forgotten my rennet, and headed back and did the regulars. I stopped at I got at the meat market. I always stop there to get my week's supply of bulk sausage and sauerkraut, and I stopped at the a municipal building, borough council where they meet, and the borough manager. She's getting to know me pretty well, and I her. Her name's Lisa. And I wanted to tell her a couple things. One, I had more questions, but I'll come to that second. I wanted to tell her that I was making up this story called Earth's Drink Honeymoon, and I was thinking about using her last name, maiden name, as the name for my character Heidi. She'd never read the book Heidi, but she knew in her family she had some Heidis and Peters that I told her those were going to be the names, but that I found out her name was Swiss German, and it's spelled completely different. It's an anglicized spelling. Her maiden name, her current name is not that, but she said, you're right, she knew that. And so we had a nice conversation. But the other thing was that she's the one that told me about that whorehouse. And she said that's what it was. She said that's what everybody called it. She couldn't remember the name exactly, but she thought she could. And I told her I thought I had seen it in one of the old pictures, and it didn't look to me like a normal house. I was trying to get her, she's around 50, I think, to get her, she could remember what it looked like before they tore it down. And she was having trouble remembering exactly what it looked like. But she almost remembered the name. And she said, are you coming to the meeting Monday? And, you know, I was surprised. Yes, I was planning to come to that meeting. I hadn't thought about it. I was coming up. This is a borough council meeting. I've been to two, talked to two of them, been to four, I think, and talked twice. And I said, yeah, I was going to, but I was going to behave myself and not say anything. She said, oh, no, that's fine. But anyway, she knew that one of the borough councilmen would know. He would know much more about it. And she wrote it down and she'd find out. So that was productive. Then I went on to Danny K's Cafe, and Sheena was back, and Sheena looked healthy. Her family, and she's been under so much stress lately. You know, and these are productive conversations just about everywhere I go. I was telling her about the made-up story, Earth's Drink Honeymoon, that I'm doing, and I wanted to tell her that she knew some people that I was going to use as the base for my characters, the four guides. Well, she'd know the two of those guides that I'm using for the base, and more stuff, and she was interested. And I mentioned Water Street, that there was going to be a market down there in Water Street. Well, to mention Water Street, a guy says, Water Street, that's where I live, this voice says. A guy at a gaming machine, and he's actually from Pittsburgh, but he's lived in Roaring Spring, I think 16, maybe 18 years. And I said, oh, good, I wanted to know somebody down there at Water Street. He said, what do you want to know about Water Street? Water Street is an area about, well, all of these are so productive conversations. Then I went on to, of course, to the brewery, the Spring Dam Brewery, and mostly talked brewing beer with Mike the brewer. We had something else we got into. No, I don't know. So anyway, there's my debriefing, I guess. I'm probably forgetting something major. But I'm going back today because I want to get that rennet. I came home and I didn't have rennet, and I've got milk that's clabbering right there, and by tonight I want to put rennet in and make the cheese. So today, Thursday, I'm planning this afternoon to make quite a long trip through Morrison's Cove, more so than Roaring Spring, because that lady in the Giant Eagle, she gave me the names of these little stores that might have rennet. And I thought, I'll just see if I can find them. I've got about 6 reasons or so to make the trip. So I don't like to drive that much, but I think I'll do it. That was kind of quick. Bye for now.